Good morning. Welcome to the North Shore Unitarian Church, where our mission is to empower people to live with greater depth, meaning, and purpose. My name is Lindsay Hindle. I am your lay chaplain and your Sunday service associate this morning. And what I love about this community is how dynamic it is. There are so many opportunities to get involved in different ways, spiritually, volunteering, just enjoying community together. We are a busy congregation with so many things going on here, so please note the announcements in your order of service on the screen. I also have one additional announcement for you, and that is about tonight's Halloween event. So see the order of service for more details for that. Get out in your costumes and bring some food and have some fun. And lastly, I'd like to give an extra special welcome to any newcomers or visitors we have this morning. We're glad you're here, truly. If you would like to learn more about our community, I'd encourage you to sign in with your contact information on our iPad in the foyer. And if you have any questions about our congregation or the Unitarian Universalist tradition, our connections coordinator, Ariel, and any of our friendly volunteers wearing greeter buttons would be happy to chat with you. And after the service, I'd like to invite everyone from longtime members to first-time visitors to come downstairs for coffee and tea and conversation. And we would really love to just welcome everyone. Because here in this congregation, we really do mean everyone. In this community, we celebrate people from all walks of life. No matter how you make your living, or how you experience the sacred, no matter who you are or who you love, we hope you will feel welcome here. I now welcome Erin McNeil to say a few words about her connection she has felt here.
I find that it's actually during the practice of writing the check for Canvas that my reasons for coming to church get razor sharp. I should explain that I have attention deficit disorder. So I have to find the check, write the check, do the math 42 times on a napkin, lose the napkin, find the napkin, put the check in a safe place, forget where the safe place is, dodge a couple calls from Mark. Eventually it happens, but it is a process. Throughout this time-honored process, I reflect about what the North Shore Unitarian Church means to me. And when I do this, I often think about Halloween potlucks, children's retreats, gift-making workshops, Sunday school lessons that have taught me more about being a Unitarian from the children than anybody else, it seems. I love that this sharing of time, space, and celebration builds this amazing sense of community amongst a diverse group of individuals, often whose only touch point is this church, this congregation. These days, after almost 10 years of attending, I find that I'm less concerned about what this congregation brings to my life and more concerned about what I can bring to the congregation. I've learned that through saying yes when asked to volunteer, to participate, or to give, I'm often pushed to explore my deepest held beliefs and values, which ultimately always deepens my identity as a Unitarian. I get way more than I've ever given. I also reflect on the services that really opened my heart and mind. Like just this past month when we did the reading, we forgive ourselves and each other, and we begin again in love. I felt my heart knit back together a little bit, knit a hole I didn't really know was there. Even now, the words continue to resonate for me. I love that each of us has that moment for different reasons and at different times, but that we're all here together for each other. When I finally do finish writing the check, filling out the pledge form, and hand them in, sometimes it's January, I'm super comfortable in my heart and mind that this is the absolute right thing to do, and that when I come here, I really do get more than I have ever given. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Barbara Hove and have the privilege and pleasure of serving as your consulting minister this year. And it was a treat for me to join Allison and Toby and your wonderful choir on Thursday night and to get to sing this beautiful Gaelic blessing that I thankfully already knew, so I could sneak in and sing. I hope you know how fortunate you are to have such a wonderful music program here. Music is absolutely central to the life of congregations, and I know a thing or two about music, and this church is incredibly fortunate. I hope you know that. But you're fortunate just to be here on this day, to be together. We're all fortunate. The rains have come, the earth is happier, even if it's a little harder to get around, and our feet land in puddles, as mine did the other night in your parking lot. I think my shoe will survive. Well, this morning I'm going to be talking about a difficult subject, but one that I always talk about this time of year. Tonight we're going to be celebrating Halloween with a lot of the fun elements of that. But this time of year is traditionally, particularly in pagan cultures, a time to reckon with this peculiar and wonderful and challenging and terrible dynamic of being born and having to die. And so I always talk about death this time of year. And so these words may help us as we move deeper into this service, and they come from the Omaha people. No one has found a way to avoid death, to pass around it. Those old ones who have met it, who have reached the place where death stands waiting, have not pointed out a way to circumvent it. Death is difficult to face. But I find it easier to face when we are together, and I hope you do too. And I think it's always important when we talk about hard things to also talk about the wonder and beauty and glories of life. So let us rise and sing together one of my all-time favorite hymns from our hymnal, hymn number 128, For All That Is Our Life.
I first met my great-uncle George at a family reunion in Thunder Bay when I was 6 years old. There were over 250 people at that family reunion. Not only did I meet my great-uncle George, I met my great-uncle Alma, my great-uncle Auntie Borgie, on and on and on. Because you see, my grandfather and great-uncle George were brothers, and there was 11 of them in total, which meant there were many, many, many people in our family, our extended family. It was a wonderful time. And over the years, I had the chance to get to know these ancestors. And it was my grandfather and great-uncle George that put hours and hours and hours of work into discovering our family tree, digging into our heritage, and making contact with family in Norway. And I got to travel to Norway and spend a year, and I lived with some of my family, some of those extended cousins, and I got to know more and more about our ancestors. And this week, great-uncle George passed away. He was the last one left. And sometimes it's hard to reckon with that fact that an entire generation is gone. And to suddenly realize my parents, my aunts and uncles, they're the next in line. And it might give you a shiver. You might be that person. You might be that aunt, that uncle, that grandma that is next in line. But that is life. And the beauty of that is that one day, when you do pass on, when I pass on, we become part of that beautiful lineage of ancestors that are remembered by the living, that have mornings on Sunday morning dedicated to them. Just think about that. So this morning, I dedicate this chalice to all our ancestors behind us, and to that lineage we all one day will pass into. We kindle this flame as a symbol of our gathering.
May the light and understanding illuminate our darkness. May the warmth of sharing bring us peace.
I invite you, if you choose, to join with me in a time of prayer or reflection. Gracious One, whom we call by many names, our heart are torn asunder again. Once again, hatred and violence have shown their ugly head, and we mourn with those who have been killed yet again because of hate. Imagine being in worship and having someone come and kill your neighbor, your friend, your family member. It is unfathomable, and yet it has happened once again. And so we call upon the great Spirit of life to hold those who are mourning the loss of their loved ones. May we hold all those in our hearts. As Lindsay lights our first candle, let us give thanks for all those who responded, for those who were there and helped. Let us give thanks for all who do not let hatred enter into their hearts, even when anger is flowing so great. We know there is hatred and injustice in the world, but there is love in this room, and I am ever so grateful for it. If there is someone in your life who is struggling, someone who has died, someone who is hurt or sick, or just someone that you know needs to be held in the arms of this beloved community, I invite you to call their face into your mind's eye. And then, if you choose to speak their names into this circle of community now. As Lindsay lights our second candle, may we hold all of these in our hearts and also hold those whose names we did not speak and whose names we do not know, but who need to be held in love, as we all do today. And let us take some time in silence to hold our own prayers, our own thoughts deep and true. Death is ultimately about balance. It is the dark other side of life. It is a mystery that generations of humans have sought to understand. It happens to us all, yet it is something most of us deny, even to the moment it takes us. I'm afraid to die. There, I've said it, but I don't say it easily. I'm a minister. I'm supposed to know how to face death. I have dealt with death a lot. I've seen it come unwilling and unasked for like a villain. And I've also seen it come like a welcome friend. But I've only seen death come to others. I can't be a witness at my own deathbed. I have to leave that to others. Just because I've seen death a lot doesn't mean I understand it. I get it intellectually, but the reality of it is kind of hard to fathom. I remember reading a book long ago with the title, How Could I Not Be Among You? And I think that's how a lot of us look at death. It just seems impossible to imagine the world without us. I mean, the world without me. Wow. And yet, it existed for generations before me, and it's going to exist generations after me. At least I hope so. But right here and now, it's the damnedest thing, isn't it? I, like everyone else in this room, will someday be dead. It's just weird to contemplate. Perhaps because it's so weird, people have tried to figure it out, tried to figure out ways to cheat death. You know those shows on PBS, or the Canadian version of PBS, that they do about people like Ramses II, one of the great leaders, or so they say, of Egypt. Now, they know a lot about this pharaoh because he created for himself and for his loved ones lavish tombs filled with incredible paintings and sculptures and hieroglyphics of Egyptian life circa 1200 BCE. Even Ramses' body was preserved in hopes that he might thus escape death. Today, his wizened mummy lives on, sort of, in the Cairo Museum, but Ramses II, I'm afraid, is still dead. Now, ancient people in all places around the globe made much of death. Anthropologists often look for death rituals to determine the kind of culture that was present at the time. There seems to be something in the human spirit going back into the dark recesses of history that calls us to remember those who have died. It's why we have this wonderful picture of a graveyard up here. I love graveyards. I love to go and read the little mini stories that they tell. These kinds of tombstones are placed, burial cairns are built, names recorded, as if by doing so we might keep the dead alive. But death rituals are only one way we humans have dealt with the scary reality of death. Even more interesting to me are the ways that human beings imagine an afterlife, how we seek immortality. Now, I'm not an expert in this by any means, but it does intrigue me the way that religious people in particular approach the concept of immortality. For an example, we might look at Hinduism, one of the most ancient religions that's still practiced today. Hindus believe that the soul passes through a cycle of successive lives, samsara, and its next incarnation is always dependent on how the previous life was lived, the concept I'm sure you know of karma. Now, in a lifetime, people build up karma, both good and bad, based on their actions, and this karma affects their future lives. Thus, people must take responsibility for their actions, either within this lifetime or the next. Death is a key part of this cycle and is treated with specific importance. Well, Hinduism was the parent of Buddhism, which also has a belief in the importance of freeing the spirit from the desires of the world and the body. To a Buddhist, karma is also a way to walk through many lives in search of nirvana, which is not heaven in any sense, but rather a state of pure freedom, which is nothingness. An important thing to remember is that life, death, and rebirth are a continuum in the Buddhist and Hindu faiths. They don't believe that a soul has only one life and one existence. The idea that the soul has only one life and one existence, however, is a key part of the Christian view of death and the afterlife. Many Christians, though certainly not all, believe that God, through Jesus Christ, will judge people after death and either send them down to hell — it's always interesting to me how it's sort of an up and down thing — or up to heaven at the last judgment. Those who are good and believe the right things will find happiness and everlasting life with Jesus, and those who don't are sent to hell, a place of fires and everlasting torment. Now, our Universalist ancestors rejected the idea of hell, and I reject it too, but I find the concept interesting. I mean, if you ever get a chance to look at paintings that depict heaven or hell, you gotta admit that hell looks a lot more interesting. And if you like popular culture, you might check out the funny and compelling sitcom The Good Place, which deals with this in very amusing ways. And another pop culture reference. An interesting view on the afterlife, in my opinion, comes from, of all things, the incredibly awful Twilight novels by Stephenie Meyer. Not everyone knows that Stephenie Meyer is a Mormon. And for people in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the afterlife is very interesting, and they have very strong beliefs in the afterlife. It's a place where we go to live after death, in bodies that look like us but are more beautiful, where we can be with the one we love forever, where we are strong and capable and, well, not dead. Now, if you've ever read the Twilight novels or seen the films, and please don't identify yourselves because you'll embarrass yourself, because they're terrible. They're just terrible. But I saw them. I did. I admit to it. I think that Stephenie Meyer from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has a view of heaven as vampires. I mean, Mormon heaven looks a lot like the life of the good vampires, but without all that blood. But I digress. Afterlife concepts are interesting, but they do require one thing, and that is death. And there are those of us in our world today whose view of immortality is not related to death at all. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this service was my growing concern over the scientific rationale beginning to emerge that suggests that humans might not only be able to extend life to unimaginable lengths, 200 years, anyone, but the belief that we might prevent death altogether. Some of this thinking seems to me at least a little kind of off the charts, like the cryogenics movement made notorious when the famous baseball player Ted Williams had his head cut off at death and frozen, which is what cryogenics does. But there is a part of this that is far more mainstream. And certainly, much of this comes from modern medicine, and the expansion of lifespans in modern medicine is wonderful. I mean, there's much for which I'm extremely grateful about some of this technology. Modern medicine's ability to take my father's heart out of his chest while doing bypass surgery extended his life by 7 years. And I know many of you could tell of modern miracles like that. As grateful as I am for such things, I admit to some trepidation when I read about a group called transhumanists. When I first heard their name, I assumed they might be something vaguely Unitarian. Transcendentalist humanist, perhaps? But no. Transhuman is short for
transitional human. And it refers to the day when our species will be a blend of biology and machine.
Likewise,
transhumanists are interested in ever-increasing number of technologies that can boost humans' physical, intellectual, and psychological capabilities beyond what we are naturally capable of.
Believers in this idea are becoming more mainstream as nanotechnology, to use just one example, allows things to happen that seem unbelievable, at least to me. For example, in an experiment in 1998, I mean, this was 20 years ago, a neurosurgeon
implanted a device into the brain of a locked-in patient who couldn't eat, drink, or talk on his own. Before the surgery, the patient could communicate only by blinking his eyes. Afterward, he could send messages via a computer simply by thinking.
And so much more has happened in the last 2 decades. Well, it seems monstrous to be even critical of such advances. It must be good and right to help those who are suffering. It is good and right to help those who are suffering. But there is, at least among some of these people, an ideology, and one might even call it a theology, that lies behind some of this. On the surface, it can look as if these folks love humanity and all it stands for, and I know that plenty of them do. James Hughes, a transhumanist and author of Citizen Cyborg, Why Democratic Societies Must Respond to the Redesigned Human of the Future, writes,
Human intelligence in the form of technology is about to make possible the elimination of pain and create lives filled with unimaginable pleasure and contentment.
The elimination of pain would help me a lot. And a life of pleasure and contentment doesn't sound so bad either. But I can't help but be skeptical. Like one critic has noted, I wonder if
Transhumanism isn't the ultimate illustration of how Enlightenment rationalism can easily run amok.
our faith tradition, Unitarianism in particular, emerged in its modern form from the Enlightenment. As a faith community, we are the best educated of all religions, if surveys are to be believed. Many in our congregations, many of you, are scientists. Most of us are extremely rational, and few of us believe in any traditional concepts of heaven and hell. This being so, it might seem logical that we should embrace transhumanism and do all we can to lengthen lives and create a perfect society. And yet humans are not perfect, and we have a lousy track record of trying to make ourselves or others perfect. Eugenics, practiced by the Nazis in their attempt to create a genetically pure race, comes to mind as just one horrifying example. And if you think it was only the Nazis, there were Unitarians who were great fans of eugenics. But I think that this move toward creating a transitional human, one that would live forever, has roots less in the desire to perfect humanity, which is on the surface at least a noble goal, and more in the great, long-standing human fear of death. Yes, I'm back to our wonderful topic. Death to transhumanists and to many people is the enemy. It is always to be feared. It is always to be defeated. Yet death can't be defeated. And I would argue that death shouldn't be defeated. Yes, it's scary. Yes, it's very sad that our lives are finite. But without death, there would truly be no life. I mean, just imagine it for an instant. What if all of us in this room were to chance upon a magic well that we could drink from to make us immortal? Would you drink from it? Well, think about it for a minute. No death sounds great. But what would it mean for our world if nobody died? In her marvelous children's book, Tuck Everlasting, author Natalie Babbitt addresses this issue directly. Without giving the plot away, here's the meaning of the story as spoken by the immortal Mr. Tuck.
You can't have living without dying, so you can't call it living. This immortality we got, we just are, we just be like rocks in the road.
Rocks in the road can't hurt or grieve, but they also can't feel the wonder of life either. Rocks aren't mortal, but people are. In a peculiar way, and one many of these scientists would hotly deny, transhumanists remind me of some fundamentalists, Christian and otherwise, who have such a fear of death and such a loathing of the human body that they seek to find any way to to move beyond it. One critic has said that transhumanists see our bodies, and these are his words, as meat puppets. Meat puppets, to be shed when we become immortal. This feels uncomfortably close to some of the way fundamentalists describe our bodies and their sinful nature that can only be purified in some wonderful or horrible afterlife. Part of the problem with bodies, dear ones, is that bodies die. Bodies are mortal. Every body dies. That's the way life works. So one critical aspect of dealing with death is dealing with our bodies. Bodies that are wonderful when they're working well. Eyes that see the beautiful world, ears that hear the marvelous music, hands that touch and reach out in loving embrace, feet that take us to incredible places, minds that learn so much. But bodies can be hard to bear when they don't work well. I have a number of friends with Parkinson's and MS who are losing their ability to walk. Too many elders in my life are struggling with dementia, and one of my best friends has cancer that I don't really expect she's gonna survive. And I'm sure there are many people that you know who are struggling with health issues, from joints that need replacing to hearts that don't work so well, maybe some of you. And these folks are still thankfully with us. But think of all of those who have died recently. Irene and Sharon and other people, those people in that synagogue in Pittsburgh and in that grocery store. Young people, middle-aged people, the old alike. People are precious, and people's bodies fail and ultimately die. I think the challenge for us as religious people is to live with an incredible paradox. Life is extraordinarily wonderful, a gift beyond measure, something to give thanks for every single day. And life is hard, ending for all of us in death. That's just the way it is. We don't have to like it, but we do have to accept it. Why? Why die? Because death is necessary for life to continue. The late Steve Jobs, founder of Apple Computers and no slouch in the brains department, spoke once at a college graduation. I find his words fascinating, particularly in that context. I mean, here are these fresh-faced young students preparing to take on the world, and they listen to one of the greatest advocates of technology speak these, in my opinion, deeply spiritual words. Steve Jobs said,
No one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet, death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it. And that is how it should be, because death is very likely the single best invention of life. It is life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. Right now, the new is you. But someday, not too long from now, you will gradually become the old and be cleared away. Sorry to be so dramatic, but it's quite true.
It is true. But that doesn't make it easy. As our opening words reminded us, facing death is difficult. I know that. Oh, I know. But it's something we all must do. I'm still scared to die. It frightens me to think about my own death. More, it frightens me to think about my beloved husband's death, or my sister's, or anyone else that I love. The fear of death is something that I think I'm going to work to overcome, or at least accept better. Death, I know, has baffled and haunted humans as long as we've been around, and I expect it will continue to do so long after all of us in this room are gone. But here in this interval that I've been given to live, I want to face death with more than fear. I want to face it with love, maybe even with hope. And I want to face it knowing that I don't face it alone. Community is a blessing for all of us, and being together can make the fact and experience of death seem easier to take. And in our grief, being together is so important. I hope you'll join me for Sharon's memorial service here on November 14th. It's so important to bring our grief into community. But this I must say to you as well, my dear ones. I don't know what happens after death, but whatever it is natural and right, and it happens to all of us, no matter our religion or lack thereof. In the meantime, perhaps death can remind us to cherish life, for that is perhaps its greatest gift. Nothing lasts forever. And things that don't last forever are the most precious of all. And so I end my sermon with these words from the play The Shadow Box by Michael Christopher.
And then you think, someone should have said it sooner.
Someone should have said it a long time ago.
When you were young.
Someone should have said this living,
This life.
this lifetime, it doesn't last forever.
A few days, a few minutes.
That's all.
It has an end.
Yes.
This face,
These hands,
this word,
it doesn't last forever. This air,
this light,
this earth,
these things you love,
oh, these children,
this smile,
this pain, it
doesn't
doesn't last
last
forever.
it was never supposed to last forever.
This day,
This morning,
this evening,
these eyes,
these things you see,
it's pretty.
yes,
These things you hear,
oh, this noise,
this music,
yes,
yes,
it
it
doesn't last forever.
forever.